For years, I've been my wife's biggest cheerleader. She's worked incredibly hard to build her career as a VTuber streamer, starting from scratch with her own character and gradually growing a following. A few years ago, she signed with a talent agency that specializes in VTubers, and since then, her hobby has turned into a full-time job. I couldn't be prouder of her dedication and success, knowing how much effort she's poured into this dream. But about a month ago, I received an email that threw me for a loop. It was from her talent agency, requesting that I sign a legal agreement. At first, I thought it was spam. It was oddly worded and went straight to my junk folder. When I looked closer, I realized it was a legitimate document, drafted by a real law firm. The agreement demanded two main things: that I not publicly represent myself as my wife's spouse, whether online or at events, and that if we ever separated, I'd be forbidden from discussing our breakup to protect her anonymity and identity. I was stunned. While I understand the importance of anonymity in the VTuber world and how fans can be disillusioned by the idea of their favorite streamer having a partner, this felt extreme. The whole thing seemed over the top and deeply personal, something I'd never expected to be tied to her career. When I brought it up to my wife that evening, her reaction was guarded. She admitted she had been expecting the conversation, but tried to downplay the agreement as a mere formality. "It's just how the industry works," she said, brushing off my concerns. But I couldn't shake the unease I felt. This wasn't just a casual request. It was a binding legal document. Her behavior leading up to this suddenly made sense. A few weeks prior, she'd asked me to take down photos of us from my private Twitter account, citing concerns about her privacy. She also locked and deleted some of her personal social media accounts, which she said was for security reasons. At the time, I thought she was just being cautious, but now I realized it was part of a bigger effort to separate her personal life from her online persona. I told her I'd be happy to help if it made her life easier, but I wasn't comfortable signing anything without consulting a lawyer first. This upset her. "It's not a big deal," she insisted. "You're making it more complicated than it needs to be." Her frustration stung, but I stood firm. If this was going to affect me legally, I needed to be sure of what I was agreeing to. Over the next few days, tension grew between us. My wife became distant and cold. She'd brush off my attempts to connect, saying she was too busy preparing for collaboration streams or telling me to leave the house while she worked. When I finally confronted her, she admitted she was upset because I hadn't signed the agreement yet. She accused me of standing in the way of her dreams. "If you loved me, you'd just sign it," she said. That comment cut deep. I reminded her of all the support I'd given her, encouraging her through self-doubt, helping her fund equipment and commissions, and celebrating every milestone. But she rolled her eyes, saying, "This is different. If you don't sign, you're making my life harder." It wasn't just her attitude that bothered me. Her claim that the agency was already passing her over for opportunities because I hadn't signed added to the pressure. But I couldn't ignore my gut instinct. This was a serious legal matter, and I wasn't going to be guilted into signing something without understanding it fully. A week later, I met with a lawyer to review the agreement. She read through it carefully and told me, "The only benefit of signing this is keeping your wife happy. Legally, it's riddled with issues and unlikely to hold up in court." She pointed out that if the agency ever tried to enforce the agreement, they'd have to reveal my wife's identity in legal documents, which would undermine their own efforts to protect her anonymity. The lawyer suggested contacting the agency for clarification on what would happen if I breached the agreement and whether there was any compensation for signing. I shared this with my wife, assuring her I was still willing to sign if the lawyer ultimately recommended it. But the agency never responded, and I decided not to sign. This decision didn't seem to impact her career, but it deepened the strain between us. She stopped talking about work with me entirely, and her responses to my questions became clipped and dismissive. I wanted to support her, but I also felt like I was being shut out of her life. As time went on, my wife's career continued to flourish. She gained followers, participated in collaborations, and appeared happier in her work than she'd ever been in her old job. I'm proud of her success, but our relationship feels stuck in limbo. She's polite but distant, no longer sharing her struggles or victories with me. When I ask how things are, she says, "You don't care, so why ask?" Despite her coldness, I've tried to stay supportive. I check in on her streams, promote her work where I can, and give her space when she needs it. I don't regret standing my ground on the legal agreement, but I can't help wondering if it's irreparably damaged our marriage. I love her, and I want her to succeed, but I also want to feel like we're still a team. For now, I'm holding on to the hope that time will heal the rift between us. I've done everything I can to show her that I'm on her side, even if I didn't blindly agree to her agency's demands. Only time will tell if that's enough to bridge the gap. We all have that one family member who manages to make every outing more complicated than it needs to be. For me, that person is my cousin, who claims to have allergies to practically everything under the sun. While I respect genuine medical conditions, her behavior has been driving me up the wall, mostly because I've seen her eat many of these allergy-triggering foods without any problems for years. Lately, it feels like every time we go out to eat, she makes a big deal about her supposed level 5 allergies. These aren't quiet, quick mentions to the waiter for safety. No, they're dramatic declarations that leave the staff scrambling and the rest of us cringing in embarrassment. To make matters worse, she inevitably orders something that contains the very thing she's allergic to, brushes off any warnings, and eats it without issue. It's baffling. The first time this happened, we were at a cozy Italian restaurant. My cousin ordered a pizza, then launched into her usual spiel about her level 5 garlic allergy. The poor waiter's face turned pale, and they quickly fetched the manager, who explained that all their pizzas contained garlic in the sauce. At this point, I expected her to send the pizza back or change her order. But instead, she smiled and said, "Oh, that's okay then." I was stunned. Isn't a level 5 allergy supposed to mean absolutely no exposure? Yet, there she was, happily eating her pizza without a single complaint. No reaction, no discomfort, just a perfectly normal meal. It left me questioning the legitimacy of her allergies and feeling secondhand embarrassment for the unnecessary panic she caused. The next time we went out, it was a Chinese restaurant. My cousin ordered seafood soup, which seemed innocent enough. But as soon as the waiter approached the table, she loudly declared, "I have a level 5 allergy to fish." The waiter froze, looking utterly confused, before asking if she wanted to change her order. Her mother chimed in, explaining that my cousin had eaten the soup before, but simply avoided the shrimp. The waiter, still visibly alarmed, explained that the soup's broth was made from shrimp and fish stock, meaning the allergens were in every bite. "Oh, that's fine," my cousin said breezily. "I've had it before. I'm just allergic." I could feel my patience slipping. If she's genuinely allergic, why bring it up only to dismiss the concern entirely? It felt like an unnecessary performance. By the second meal, I couldn't hold my tongue anymore. That evening, I told her she needed to stop with the allergy talk, especially if she was going to ignore it entirely when ordering. I pointed out that every time she brought up her supposed allergies, it caused unnecessary stress for the waitstaff and made her a liability for the restaurant. After all, if she ever did have a real reaction, how would anyone believe her? Her response? Defensiveness. She insisted that her allergies were real and accused me of not understanding how allergies work. But here's the thing. I might not be an allergist, but I'm pretty sure you can't have a severe allergy to something you consume without issue. Since that conversation, things have been tense between us. I understand that everyone has their quirks, and maybe there's a reason she brings up her allergies the way she does. But as someone who genuinely values clear communication and respects restaurant staff, her behavior feels unnecessary and performative. It's not just about the embarrassment. It's about the potential consequences of crying wolf. If she keeps this up, how can anyone take her seriously if she ever does have a genuine medical emergency? At this point, I'm torn between letting it go for the sake of peace and continuing to call her out when she stirs unnecessary drama. Either way, I can't help but wonder, was I wrong to say something? Or was it about time someone addressed the elephant in the room?
My husband, Ray 42, and I 31 have been married for 12 years, and we have 2 children, an 8-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. From the outside, our family might look fine, but behind closed doors, our marriage has been strained for years. A significant source of tension has always been Ray's mother and sister, who feel entitled to weigh in on everything from our parenting to our marriage. Their constant interference has caused countless arguments. Things had improved slightly in the past few months after I sat Ray down and insisted he address their behavior. While his family didn't completely back off, they became less overbearing. Just when I thought we might be turning a corner, Ray started bringing up the idea of having a third child, a suggestion that filled me with dread. I love children and once dreamed of having a big family. But the reality of raising two kids, largely on my own, has left me exhausted. I work part-time from home, manage all the cooking, cleaning, and childcare, and take care of every detail of our children's lives, from school to doctor appointments to playdates. Meanwhile, Ray does little beyond working his full-time job. He's never changed a diaper, dealt with sleepless nights, or managed a feverish child. When he's home, he barely interacts with the kids, often snapping at our daughter for being too loud. The thought of going through another pregnancy and raising a third child while carrying the bulk of the parenting load makes me want to cry. Ray's argument? I provide for the family. Women have been doing this for centuries. You should pull your weight and not be spoiled. Those words play on repeat in my head, fueling my frustration. One night, after another one of Ray's monologues about how he takes great care of us and how we should have a third child, I snapped. I told him he doesn't take care of us. The kids barely know him because he doesn't spend time with them. He doesn't ask about their days or mine. I explained that I stopped updating him on our lives because he never listened. I said he isn't the great father or husband he imagines himself to be, and I have no desire to be a single mom to 3 kids. 2 are more than enough. Ray looked stunned, then called me the C word and stormed out. He went to his mother's house, leaving me alone to stew in my frustration. The next morning, I braced myself for what I knew was coming. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law arrived at my house, clearly expecting me to be alone. My sister, Em, was visiting, which seemed to catch them off guard. They sat down and launched into a lecture about my behavior, blaming me for everything. I calmly repeated that this was a conversation, Ray, and I needed to have as a married couple, and I didn't see why they were meddling. This infuriated them. My mother-in-law, red-faced, screamed that I wasn't the same girl her son married. I replied that, of course, I wasn't. I was a teenager when we got married, and now I'm a grown woman. Their insults escalated until Em threatened to call the police if they didn't calm down. They eventually left, but not before accusing me of being a terrible wife and mother. A few hours later, Ray finally returned. Instead of asking about the kids or how I was, he berated me for mistreating his mother. His tone shifted when Em came downstairs, but our conversation still went nowhere. He accused me of not loving him because I didn't want more kids and called me a bad wife. I pointed out that he hadn't even asked about the kids, who hadn't seen him in days. When I told him they were at my sister's house, he exploded, calling my sister and brother-in-law vile names. I suggested divorce. At first, Ray told me to pack my things and leave, ranting about how I wouldn't survive without him. But when I explained that the kids would stay in the house and we'd figure out custody, his tone shifted. He claimed he was willing to hear me out. By then, I was too angry to care. I told him I was done. As our argument continued, Ray became more agitated. He started clenching his fists and grinding his teeth, which scared me. When I reiterated that I wanted a divorce, he grabbed my shoulders and began shaking me. Em stepped in, and they started shoving each other. I called the police. Together, Em and I managed to push him out of the house and lock the door before the police arrived. Ray fled before they got there, but Em and I gave our statements. She sustained a few scratches, but we were otherwise unharmed. Since that night, Ray's family has been bombarding me with texts, blaming me for everything. Ray, however, hasn't said a word. I've decided to file for divorce. I'm done hoping for change that will never come. This isn't the life I want for myself or my children. Reflecting on everything, I realize how much I owe Em. In the past, I unfairly resented her, projecting my own unhappiness onto her. But she's been my rock through this ordeal, standing by me when I needed her most. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm determined to create a better, healthier life for my kids and myself.
After 6 years of marriage, I never thought I'd find myself standing in a park near my home, preparing to end it all. But the trust between my wife and me had been shattered, and I knew there was no going back. It all came down to her actions, dancing, drinking, and kissing another man, and then hiding it from me. For her, it might have been a fleeting mistake, but for me, it was a betrayal I couldn't ignore. I asked her to meet me so we could clear the air before moving forward with a divorce. I wanted a clean break without unnecessary drama or lingering questions. When she arrived, she greeted me with a hug and asked if we could go home to talk. I shook my head and told her we needed to stay here and have an honest conversation. That simple refusal seemed to irritate her, and she accused me of being unreasonable. I looked her in the eye and asked, "Wouldn't you be angry if you found out I was out drinking, dancing, and kissing other women while hiding it from you?" She hesitated before admitting that she would be upset, but quickly added that she wouldn't throw away 6 years of marriage over something like that. Her words hit me hard. It was so easy for her to minimize what she'd done because she wasn't the one who had been betrayed. "That's easy for you to say," I replied, my voice steady. "You cheated, and I didn't. I don't want to live the rest of my life worrying about what you're doing behind my back or wondering if it was really just a kiss. How do I know this hasn't happened before or won't happen again? I've made up my mind. I want a divorce." Her expression crumbled as she began to plead with me. She insisted that divorce was extreme and begged me to consider reconciliation. She claimed she loved me and that she would delay the process as much as possible because she didn't want to lose me. But my mind was made up. "I'm sorry too," I told her, "but I can't forgive you for stepping out of our marriage. Let's not make this ugly. You keep what's yours, and I'll keep what's mine." Her pleas became more desperate, and I could see the panic in her eyes. She argued that I was throwing everything away over one mistake, but I reminded her that trust is the foundation of any marriage. Once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. I told her I had evidence of her infidelity, something I'd gathered to protect myself after she tried to turn our families against me. I explained that I hadn't wanted to involve anyone else, but when her family began harassing me, I had no choice but to share the truth. Even then, I had spared her coworkers from finding out to avoid jeopardizing her professional life. "Let's just make this as smooth as possible," I said, hoping to avoid further conflict. At that moment, she broke down in tears. I hugged her briefly, knowing it would be the last time. "It's over," I whispered. "There's no fixing this. We might love each other, but love isn't enough when trust is gone." After leaving the park, I decided to block her texts and calls. I needed space to process everything and focus on the next steps. My mind kept replaying the conversation and the countless comments from others saying, "It was just a kiss." But how could anyone be sure? Even I didn't know if it was just one kiss or if there had been more. Maybe this was only the tip of the iceberg. I couldn't shake the thought of what might come next if I stayed. Would I become one of those men who forgives their cheating wife only to discover she's still unfaithful? Or worse, would I wake up years later to find out I'd been raising another man's child? I refused to let myself become another cautionary tale. The road ahead is daunting, but I've made up my mind. No matter how tough or expensive it gets, I'm filing for divorce. I don't want to live a life filled with doubt and resentment. Marriage is built on trust, and once that's gone, the foundation crumbles. I've started researching the legal process and reaching out to the right people to help me navigate what's next. It's a painful and lonely path, but I know it's the right one. Deep down, I still love her, but love alone can't fix what's broken. As I prepare for this new chapter, I'm learning to prioritize my self-respect and peace of mind. This decision isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about reclaiming my life and ensuring I don't settle for less than what I deserve.